In the center of Africa lies a country whose name sounds almost like a geographic description, the Central African Republic. On a map, it sits far from any ocean, surrounded by 6 neighbors: Chad, Sudan, South Sudan, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the Republic of the Congo, and Cameroon. It is a landlocked state of about 620,000 square kilometers, roughly the size of France and Belgium combined, but with a population of just over 5.3 million people as of 2024. To many outside the region, the country is barely visible in global news, except during moments of crisis. Yet the Central African Republic tells a much larger story, a story of difficult colonial borders, fragile institutions, extreme poverty, valuable resources, and communities trying to survive in a country where geography and history have made development especially hard. The country's geography shapes almost everything about it. Much of the Central African Republic is covered by Sudano-Guinean savanna, a landscape of grasslands, scattered trees, and seasonal changes between wet and dry periods. In the north, the environment becomes more Sahelo-Sudanian, closer to the dry belt stretching across Africa beneath the Sahara. In the south, the land turns greener and denser, with equatorial forest zones connected to the Congo Basin. This variety gives the country agricultural potential, forests, wildlife, and river systems, but it also makes governing and connecting the territory difficult. Roads can become unreliable, remote communities can be isolated, and the absence of a coastline means trade depends on long routes through neighboring countries. For a poor state with limited infrastructure, distance is not just a measurement. It becomes a daily economic barrier. 2 major river systems divide the country. About 2/3 of the Central African Republic lies within the basin of the Ubangi River, a major tributary of the Congo River. The Ubangi is especially important because Bangui, the capital and largest city, sits along it on the southern border with the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The remaining third of the country drains toward the Shari River, which flows north into Lake Chad. These rivers connect the Central African Republic to larger regional systems, but they have not been enough to overcome the country's isolation. Bangui is the political and economic center, yet large parts of the interior remain weakly connected to the capital. This creates a familiar problem in fragile states. The government may exist on paper across the whole territory, but in practice its reach can be uneven, especially far from the capital. The people of the Central African Republic are not one single group. The country is home to around 80 ethnic groups, reflecting a long history of migration, settlement, trade, and local identities across Central Africa. Human habitation in the region goes back thousands of years, at least to 8000 BCE. But the borders of the modern state are far more recent. They were drawn during the colonial era, when European powers divided African territory according to imperial priorities rather than local political realities. This matters because modern borders often brought together diverse communities under a single administration while splitting cultural and trade networks across new lines. Diversity itself is not a problem. Many countries are diverse and stable. But when diversity is combined with weak institutions, uneven development, and armed competition, managing national unity becomes much harder. Before independence, the area was ruled by France under the name Ubangi-Shari. France began annexing territory in the late 19th century, first linking it to the French Congo and then, in 1903, establishing Ubangi-Shari as a separate colony within French Equatorial Africa. Colonial rule transformed the region through forced labor, extraction, and administrative systems designed mainly to serve the empire. Rather than building a broad-based economy or strong local institutions, colonial structures often concentrated power and resources in narrow channels. This legacy did not disappear in 1960, when the country gained independence. Like many newly independent states, the Central African Republic inherited borders, bureaucracies, and economic patterns shaped by colonial priorities. Independence created a national flag and government, but it did not instantly create the infrastructure, political trust, or administrative capacity needed to govern such a large and difficult territory. Language offers one of the clearest windows into the country's identity. Sango is the national language and has also served as a co-official language alongside French. French reflects the colonial past and remains important in government, education, and international relations. Sango, however, is more deeply connected to everyday communication and national cohesion. In a country with dozens of ethnic groups and languages, a shared lingua franca can help people communicate across community lines. That does not solve political or economic problems by itself, but it gives the country an important social bridge. Bangui, the capital, is the main hub where these national and international influences meet. It is the largest city, the seat of government, and the center of many services, but its dominance also highlights how much of the country remains rural, poor, and underserved. After independence, the Central African Republic entered a long period of unstable and authoritarian rule. One of the most infamous leaders was Jean-Bedel, who took power and later transformed the country into the Central African Empire, declaring himself monarch in 1976. His rule lasted until 1979 and became a symbol of extreme personal power, extravagance, and repression in a country where most people lived in deep poverty. Bokassa's era was not an isolated accident. It reflected a broader pattern in which weak institutions allowed leaders and military figures to dominate the state. When power depends more on personal networks, force, or foreign backing than on accountable institutions, government becomes fragile. Each leadership crisis can become a national crisis, because the state is not strong enough to absorb political shocks peacefully. In the 21st century, conflict became one of the defining challenges for the Central African Republic. The Central African Bush War began in 2004, followed by peace agreements in 2007 and 2011. But these agreements did not produce lasting stability. In 2012, civil war resumed, involving armed groups with competing political, regional, and economic interests. The conflict has been devastating not only because of battlefield violence, but because it weakened the already limited ability of the state to protect civilians, provide services, and control territory. Armed groups have been accused of widespread abuses, contributing to a poor human rights record. In such conditions, ordinary life becomes insecure. Farmers may be unable to cultivate fields safely, traders may face extortion on roads, and families may be displaced from their homes. One of the great paradoxes of the Central African Republic is that it is not a country without resources. It has uranium reserves, crude oil potential, gold, diamonds, cobalt, lumber, hydropower, and significant arable land. On paper, these assets could support development. In reality, resources can become a source of competition when institutions are weak. Diamonds and gold, for example, are valuable, portable, and difficult to regulate in conflict zones. Instead of funding public services, resource wealth can be captured by armed groups, corrupt networks, or narrow elites. This is sometimes called the resource curse, but the resources themselves are not cursed. The problem is governance: who controls extraction, who receives the revenue, and whether the benefits are invested in roads, schools, hospitals, and jobs. The result is one of the most severe development crises in the world. Despite its natural wealth, the Central African Republic is among the 10 poorest countries globally. As of 2017, it had the lowest GDP per capita. At purchasing power parity in the world. GDP per capita does not capture every part of life, but it does show how little economic output is available per person. The Human Development Index paints an even broader picture. As of 2023, the country ranked 191 out of 193 countries, the third lowest level of human development. When inequality is taken into account, the ranking remained near the very bottom. These numbers reflect overlapping hardships, low incomes, weak health systems, limited education, insecurity, and a shortage of opportunities for young people. Health and youth prospects are especially troubling. The country has been described as the unhealthiest country and the worst country for young people, a stark way of summarizing the burden faced by children and families. In a fragile state, health problems are not only about hospitals. They are also about roads that delay emergency care, insecurity that disrupts vaccination campaigns, poverty that limits nutrition, and conflict that forces people away from clinics and clean water. For young people, the challenge is both immediate and long-term. Education may be interrupted, jobs may be scarce, and armed groups can become a dangerous alternative source of income or protection. This creates a cycle. Instability damages development, and lack of development makes future instability more likely. The Central African Republic is also part of the international system. It belongs to the United Nations, the African Union, the Economic Community of Central African States, the Organisation Internationale de la Francophonie, and the Non-Aligned Movement. Membership in these organizations gives the country diplomatic recognition, channels for aid, and regional partnerships. But international membership cannot substitute for functioning institutions on the ground. The country's future depends on whether security can improve, whether public authority can extend beyond Ubangi, whether resource wealth can be governed transparently, and whether communities can trust a shared national project. The Central African Republic is often discussed through crisis statistics, but behind those statistics is a country with history, languages, landscapes, and people. Its central question is not whether it has potential. It clearly does. The question is whether that potential can ever be turned into stability and dignity for its citizens. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.